Don't navigate these waters alone. Find a mentor and a professional network, someone that has been through this before.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot, welcome to Ready for Pushback. You found it. It's me, Nick Fialka, and today we are welcoming back Jimmy, our anonymous friend, who has lots of questions about specific things, but also does not want to let you know who he or she is. Today's Jimmy is a he, and we are super lucky to have him. You are going to be very interested in the conversation. I'm not going to give it away because I thought that it was very fruitful, very fun. I love a coaching call because there's so many layers and there's so many things to think about. So when you are sitting here listening to this episode, think about the depth of these questions and think about how your life and your questions about the airline industry parallel the things that Jimmy is talking about, because you can find a lot of great actionable items here that are really, really impactful. And I think you will benefit immensely from this conversation. Very thankful for Jimmy to come on my show. And a quick shout out. If you are a person, if you want to be on the show and you want a coaching call or you want to talk about something you think is important, whether you want to be anonymous and be Jimmy, that's awesome. Let's go. If you are not anonymous and you want to let the world know who you are, well, come on, let's go. Send me an email, podcast@spitfireelite.com, and we'll chat about it. Certainly love to have you. And the world that listens, they'd also love to have you. So sit back, relax. Let's get ready for Pushback. Hey, pilot, did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and going to move your family across the country? Are you going to move in base somewhere? Or are you going to go out to find that second home that you've been looking for? Well, I want you to stop right now, pick up the phone, and call Marty and the team at Trident Home Loans. It's an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay. They understand contracts. They understand military. They have the best VA loans in the United States. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. They've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization. I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, reach out, get a mortgage quote, and then call Marty and his team. They will walk you through the process and show you how competitive their rates are. So go right now, tridenthomeloans.com, and check them out. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Also, you can join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance and strategies for professional pilots on the brand new Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. Hey, pilot, don't forget, on March 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be doing a live webinar with the Director of Hiring at United Airlines. You know him, Justin Ritter. We will be answering all of your questions live, so don't forget to sign up. All of the details are in the show notes and the hyperlink is there. Sign up, log in, and ask your question to Justin Ritter. I'll see you March 8th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right. Jimmy is back. Jimmy is my favorite anonymous person who is going to talk to us about a thing that is, I think, really important for a pilot who is listening to hear. And I'm really fortunate to have him on my show. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Nick, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you again.
It is awesome to see you, my man. All right. So Jimmy had a mishap. He crashed an aircraft and you set the stage for us, right? Because I want to talk about the mishap, but then I want to move on and talk about some other things too. So can you help us understand basically what happened?
Yeah, so I was on a training flight in the desert, flying a helicopter. As the instructor, it's a flight that I had flown multiple times, something I felt comfortable with, to a landing area that I had been to multiple times. It wasn't at an airport per se. We were training to the off-airport environment. And so on my last landing of the day, came into a zone we'd already been using. And on that last landing, our aircraft actually contacted the terrain. The result of that was the aircraft then rolled down a hill about 3 or 4 times. I was fortunate enough to stay conscious for the whole time. And then it came to a complete stop on its side, and I was able to safely egress. So that's kind of the main gist of what happened to me out there. So,
gosh, man, that had to have been so scary. What did it feel like when all that was going on?
So being awake the whole time was a blessing and a curse. I thought that was the end of the road for me. I thought for sure that was the case. The only thing I can think of for those 30 seconds, which felt like an eternity, was the family, the kids at home and stuff. But then all violent motion stopped, and it came to, I got out. And once I kind of shook it off, I knew I was going to be okay. I didn't have any serious injuries. Embarrassingly, one of the first things I thought about was, well, now what? I felt like my career may have been over, whether that was still in the military or as a civilian. I think there's a inaccurate stigma that anytime you have a mishap or something negative on your record, that it can be the end of the road. And that's not the end all be all for these kinds of things. It might change your trajectory is what I've learned, but it's definitely not the end of the road.
All right. Well, that is really, I can understand. There's a lot weighing on you when you have one of those experiences. When you got done with everything and the dust has settled and everybody's out and all the other stuff, then it's a long process of investigations and statements and drug tests and all of those things. And I'm sure the entire time it's just nerve-wracking, but just thankful to be alive. Once all that was completed, and had you already decided ahead of time that you were going to pursue a job in the airlines, or was it after the fact that you wanted to move that direction?
I think I was in the same position as kind of most aviators towards the end of their first commitment, in that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to close any doors at that time. I'd say my foot was leaning more towards being out at that point. And so I'd started networking some, but not nearly as much as I was about to post mishap, just because I relied heavily on mentors and just professional networks to help get me and pointed in the right direction from there.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about what it was like to kind of collect your thoughts and collect where it was and start moving forward. After, post mishap, you've got to decide that you've got to get a job. What was that route like?
Gosh, so after it occurred, I got through most of my investigations, the final one being an administrative one in nature. That one was scheduled for a Monday and knocked it out. Very stressful time, was given inconclusive results and was told to kind of wait. It's put in a holding pattern. Fast forward a few days, it was Friday, and I had landed in Fort Worth for my very first ever hiring convention, which was RTAG. So everything was very accelerated. I went right from, being evaluated to my first hiring convention and didn't know what to think, what to do. In my experience, when you have a mishap, it's all you can think about, for at least until you fully processed and digested it. So when I walked into that hiring convention, I felt like I had maybe a scarlet letter on my chest that everybody knew or everybody needed to know maybe. And so I always felt like it was on the forefront of my conscious, therefore let's talk about it, which I slowly learned that was not necessarily the case. So for me, what I thought was very helpful was the first booth I walked up to when I wasn't volunteering was the Spitfire booth. Saw a tall guy with a cowboy hat on, and he was very helpful after I laid out all my problems to him and kind of pointed me in the right direction. But I'm fortunate that was where I started, because I felt every booth I went up to, I wanted to say, "Hi, my name's Jimmy, and I had a mishap. Will you hire me?" And that's not at all what you need to do or what's important in this situation. And what I gleaned from that first convention and our first interaction was like, "Hey, man, this is your first date. Let's not talk about the first skeleton in your closet or whatever the case. Let's treat it like a first date, and we'll talk about details later."
Yeah. And that tall guy in the hat was definitely me. It was very funny because, first off, I love my cowboy hat. I used to live in Fort Worth, and I got it for my birthday. My wife gave it to me, and it's very fun. And I could not believe that I was the only person at the hiring convention wearing a cowboy hat. in Fort Worth. It seemed appropriate. But I'm very glad. I remember when you walked up to me, man, it just seemed like you were about a ball of nerves. And you were as shaken up as I've ever seen somebody come to talk. And so talk to me about how you got through the fear. It's crushing anxiety and fear to have this thing that is fresh. I didn't realize how fresh it was. Like you were just leaving a meeting with the boss who's going to decide whether you're thumbs up, thumbs down fate, and all sorts of just seemingly terrible things, to the point where now you've got to compartmentalize. You talk about CRM, man, and compartmentalization. That's what's up. And then move forward to try to find your next chapter. So what did that feel like?
So part of our discussion that day, I laid out kind of what happened to you, and you brought home the point of you're kind of the author of your own story at this point, at this junction, and coming up with a beneficial or positive way to craft your story. That doesn't mean I'm not condoning leaving important details out or anything, but it's important to maybe highlight or focus on the things that matter, or focus on the lessons that you learned, for example. And so the way I looked at this moving forward, this is very tragic and traumatic, but I've kind of been, you can also treat it as a gift, if you will. It was a traumatic experience to live through. And if I can learn something from this, then I can turn this into a positive. And that's the approach I still take moving forward when I have to discuss it. So now I think it's important to highlight exactly what happened. And then I don't spend the majority of the conversation talking about negative things. I talk about things I learned as an individual, things I learned that my crew and I could have improved upon, and then also things that my community could have improved upon. So I think it's more about perspective and how you look at it, vice letting it focus as a traumatic experience.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part, I think, is if you have something very traumatic like that. I also put DUIs in a similar category, a similar bucket, not exactly the same, but something like that where it happened. It just happened. It's there and there's nothing at all that you can do about it. And so because of that, you can either let it destroy you, or you can let it just be there and be in the past and show growth from it. And that, I think you've done such a good job creating the narrative that aligns with that, because there's no reason for your life to stop and for you to just live on the streets for the rest of your life. It just doesn't make sense. And you are a good pilot. Everybody makes an error. Some errors catch up to you faster than others. I have a friend right now who flies for a major airline that had a tail strike in an aircraft, and they are going through a process, an investigative process, and it's very, very stressful. The thing I tell that guy is, it's okay. It's in the past. You are a good pilot. It's so hard. I was just reading a thing from a friend of mine that said, when you have a good landing or something goes right in aviation, you just forget about it immediately. You have a good landing, you move on. You have a good landing, you move on. You don't think back to those great landings. But if you have a bad landing or something goes wrong and you mess it up, if you go through a checklist incorrectly, or you wonder if you should have called a go around when you kind of mangled it onto the deck and hit hard or whatever it is, you stew on that. You cannot let that go. And that's the evilness of what that is. I want it out of here. I want it gone. Whether you're religious or not, it's something defeating you. It's self-defeating. And you should know that you are better than that, and you will continue to be worthy and good enough for that. And that's the thing I wanted to bring home to you when we talked the first time. And that's why we've kept in touch too. It's okay. We love you. It's all right. And we are going to help you find an awesome job. I know tons of people that have big marks on their record, whether it's mishaps or inability to complete flights and multiple failures in training, all those different things. It all comes back around to the fact that you learn from it and you are good. And so I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off here on a tangent and a little monologue. I want to know, what has your experience been since RTAG, which was in October of 2022? Where do we stand right now?
So right now I have a CJO at a major airline. and I am expecting to depart the pattern with the military here in about 6 months. And my training date should be also coincide right with that 6-month window too. So
awesome. Let me ask you,
yeah,
how was that interview and how was the process about discussing the mishap?
Honestly, it was not that stressful at all. I don't even think it was the most stressful part of the interview. So when I came to the table and trying to strategize, how am I going to talk about this thing? Kind of like I said before, but what worked for me was spending that first 2 to 3 minutes max, just setting the stage. Hey, this is what happened. And it sounds bad and it's negative. But what's important is the impact that you're going to carry forward with the rest of that conversation. And they weren't there with you in the cockpit. They don't read your investigations or any of that stuff. So it's your job to keep that room positive, even if it's what is more commonly thought of as a negative thing, which is a craft accident. So to keep it positive, I started by laying the groundwork of what happened. And then I talked about community trends that I could affect and how I put forth some plans to do so. I talked about what my crew could have done better. And then I talked about individually what I could do better and what I do even to this day in the aircraft that I'm teaching in now, and how I have used that to improve my life. And everything from me laying that groundwork, I kept positive. And we were smiling through the whole conversation. It wasn't even stressful at all. But I had to go in with that mindset and that strategy to know that this is not a roadblock. It is a hurdle and something that's going to make me stronger at the end of the day. And I think that's what I portrayed to them and kept it positive throughout.
So was that at RTAG? Was that a meet and greet at RTAG, or was that at you got called in to interview?
So nope, the RTAG that we met at was in October. Between that meeting and my interview, I had gone to a couple other hiring conventions, got some reps in at the booths, just learning how to talk to people, being positive with everything. Put my application in. It was my first application I ever submitted to any airline. But what was key was I established the rapport with those recruiters at each of those follow-on hiring conventions. And I think we got on our first date and second date and third date before they actually got to see that it was on my interview. Or not on my interview, but on my application. So before they even had a chance to see what was there, we had already established a positive rapport. And I think that was huge.
Gosh, I think so. Everybody gets annoyed when I say networking. But gosh, buddy, that is just it. Did you encounter the same person like multiple times?
Yes, I saw the same recruiter at 2 events in a row. And one of the events was a pop-up event where they announced on like a Monday and they're like, hey, we're going to be in this town. If you're interested in interviewing, come see us. And so I hopped on the road the second I saw that and drove 6 hours to meet them there, the same recruiter. And I was like, hey, I'm here to interview. I heard you guys are having interviews. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. We're not having interviews today. And I told her what I did, that I came from, did a 6-hour drive to get there. And she's like, let me set you up with the next convention. It's in 1 week. Be there and you'll have an interview. So I think just showing that drive, that initiative was key. So
I love it. Sometimes there are certain airlines that will tell you that one meet and greet is sufficient as far as points go and things like that. And so maybe that's true. Let's say that's true. Hey, you get an extra 2 points on your application if you go do a meet and greet. Great. Go do it. You're not getting any more points. You're going to see them again. But what you are doing is building relationship. You are showing the humanity of yourself and you're becoming implanted in their brain. And I don't know of a single person that wants less face-to-face interaction. Everybody always wants more. And that is driving 6 hours is that's a big deal. Yeah, that's a tank and a half of gas probably. So that's $150. You're spending the night. That's another $300. And then maybe you have to take time off of work. So you got to burn some time there. There's opportunity cost missed, this, that, and the other. And then they say, hey, go to another convention. And you're out of pocket probably $1,000 for each convention you go to. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I look at what I spend when I go to the conventions and what Spitfire spends, and we are just presenting, right? And that's not including booth things and stuff like that. That's just to do the logistics. So for a person, some people split rooms, some people triple quad up on rooms. I get it. And so anybody that shows up at a convention, they are sacrificing, and you are sacrificing. And that's important. I want to know, when you sat down for the interview, so you did the meet and greet, you got used to it.
Mhm.
You've done it so much. Now, when we met, you were shaking.
Yeah.
Like, and now
That's just my baseline, though.
it's your baseline. But now the conversation is, you have a deeper understanding of what this thing in front of us is.
Mhm.
And you can look at it and you have named it and you can speak to it. And it is not the thing that is you, right?
Mhm.
It's detached from your worth and who you are.
Exactly.
How was it different in a meet and greet and an interview?
Meet and greet was a little bit more cheating because I didn't think it was going to come out. So it was much easier. With the interview, I knew the question was coming, but that was my opportunity to prepare and strategize and come up with my story and have it crafted, not memorized, but definitely have some key talking points and how I wanted to keep the conversation overall positive in the interview room. So meet and greet wise, I didn't even act like I had a mishap. I didn't let it sit on the forefront of my mind. I focused on my resume, what key points I could talk about from that piece of paper they're holding about me, and really just asking questions to them. So they were talking a little bit more than I was too. So
Yeah. So on your resume, there's nothing about a mishap, but on your application, there's a line, hey, do you have any accidents? And you say, check, yes. And you write your blurb about what happened.
yeah.
And you're very straightforward about it. And then they're going to ask you, they are 110% going to ask you about it. And
Yep.
I don't know, I cannot remember if I've done a solo episode about the word choice that you use. And you and I think, spoke a lot about this, about the words that you choose matter in the interview. So you can use negative sounding words that drop off and create more tension. Or you can use positive sounding words and show the words in everything that you say that have an ending that lifts things up, that makes things more positive.
Exactly.
And psychologically, that has an effect with the people in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so important to be able, especially with something so seemingly negative and terrible, to be able to not change it, not twist it, but just explain it to a point to where you're better because of it.
Yeah, I think that was critical to helping them see that this isn't that negative of an experience in my life, but also creating confidence in my mind to be able to talk about it. It's the similar principles we talk about, PICs or what have you, of a story where they're asking about a conflict. You know, you don't want to sit there and tear someone apart because you had bad CRM. You want to keep that entire story positive, even though it's a conflict story. And I pulled those tools and applied it to, and that was helpful in keeping me confident in the interview.
Yeah, I need to do a solo show on conflict questions. So many people have such aggressive conflict question answers. And I'm probably going to recommend we don't do that.
Yeah.
So now you've got your conditional job offer in hand. You are like, is this it? Are you set and you're just sitting back and ready to start the next chapter?
Ready to start the next chapter, but I think the other chapter I'm also monitoring is turning around and helping those, you know, that are in a similar boat as me. I've already reached out, or I've had people reach out to me that have also had mishaps, because it's a dark, dreary chapter to be in. Not dark because it's depressing or anything, but we also don't have like a rule book on, hey, this is what happens when you have a mishap. Like there are some little bit of guidelines we're taught in flight school and such, but you really don't understand it until you've been through it. And I think that's huge to help mentor those behind me and like try to guide them a little bit. Tell them it's going to be okay. This is how you want to talk about it, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, I love that. And that's the volunteer spirit. It's the giving spirit. And that is an awesome trait to bring forward and to have and to embrace. And you're going to be that guy until you're 65 that people are going to reach back to wanting to know. And you are going to be talking the next group of people off the ledge, figuratively, clearly. But you're going to give them hope, because that's what this episode is about, is giving people hope that they can do that. And so as we finish up here, what would you like to say to the pilot that's listening to this that has a mishap right now?
Don't navigate these waters alone. Find a mentor, find a professional network, someone that has been through this before, so they can give you some concrete, positive guidance and experience that they've seen in the community. One example that we haven't talked about that I was very grateful someone brought to my attention before I knew about it was how to address this on an application. Specifically, the major airline that I was applying for doesn't have a spot for military accidents. And I thought, okay, great. I don't even have to put it in there. But moments before hitting submit, I had a close friend and close mentor say, hey, don't do that. Like, you need to put it in there somewhere. And he said, just put it in the civilian section for now. So it's at least on the application. So it doesn't look like you're hiding something. And that's something I would have never known if I didn't have a mentor or someone to help me out there. So don't try to navigate alone. Reach out to someone that's been through that. Or if you don't know anybody personally, Spitfire was a great resource for me. That's why I signed up so early, was so I can have that guidance through this interesting time.
I get so much satisfaction with these conversations because seeing the success and the goodness that it is and all the way around, it fills my cup. And I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate our friendship. I'm so glad that we got to meet and to spend time together and pace through the conversation of what we could do. And I'm glad to have played a tiny little part in that, and excited for the rest of you pilots out there that are coming up and those that have issues and you are thinking they are going to be bigger and scarier to surmount than you have the capability of doing. Know that you can do it and it's okay. So, Jimmy, thank you for spending time. Thank you for all of the awesome mentorship that you have given, and thank you for what you do for our community. I'm looking forward to seeing you start in your major airline, my man.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your time and being able to be a part of Aviation's Best podcast.
This is important. Before you go, you need to know that 2024 is going to be unbelievably competitive in the world of pilot hiring, and you need to make sure that you separate yourself from the herd. The only way that you can guarantee that you'll land your dream job is by partnering with Spitfire Elite Interview Consulting. We are the only choice for application review and interview prep. We are the partners that you've been looking for from start to finish, and it's never too early to be part of our community. Just go over to my website, spitfireelite.com, and use the coupon code R4P to save yourself 10% on all of our services. Again, that's the letter R, the number 4, and the letter P to save 10%. So go out there and slay your interviews.